After defeating the flame skeleton, they managed to safely exit the labyrinth within 2 days. They were nearing a settlement that had few buildings and appeared quite desolate. This was to be expected, as regular people rarely ventured to this level. Consequently, there were only facilities available for use by the hunters. Lemmus was curious about how they protected themselves from monsters when there were no walls or defenses around their settlement. Philomena explained that outside the labyrinth, there was only barren land, and even the monsters couldn't survive there. The bear chairman added that there were still many places within the dungeon that defied their understanding, like the consecutive awakenings of level rulers, which he suspected to be a bad omen. Shortly after that, they arrived at the Labyrinth Level Hunter Association. As the bear chairman entered, he noticed 2 receptionists relaxing. He then addressed the receptionist who was reading a magazine, Kesha. So engrossed in her reading, Kesha had just realized that someone had arrived. She called the bear chairman by his real name, Bommy. It was the first time Boxo had heard his real name, which he found cute, but he decided to continue being addressed as the bear chairman. After their long journey, they finally found a suitable place to rest. This was the first time Boxo had slept since falling into the labyrinth level. The next day, the Foolish People squad teleported to another level. Lammus, Boxo, Hulami, and the bear cats were asked by the bear chairman to stay and observe the surroundings of the massive labyrinth. While they were still at the Hunter Association, a handsome and elegantly armored hunter entered. He went to the reception desk and introduced himself as Michelle. He had just arrived on this level and was looking for a complete map of the labyrinth. Lammus and Hulami were captivated by Michelle's appearance, and not only them, even the receptionists were so dazzled that they momentarily forgot to respond to Michelle. Once they snapped out of it, they asked Michelle to wait for 3 days as they would update the map they had. According to Lammus, Michelle looked like a brave hero from a fairy tale. However, Hulami explained that such stories had been romanticized to the point of being unrealistic. In reality, famous hunters were usually muscular men or middle-aged men. Nevertheless, Lammus had heard of a famous hunter called the owner of 100 blessings and divine power, who was said to be a very beautiful woman. Hulami had also heard about it. According to documents and stories, she was indeed described as beautiful and kind. This meant that Michelle might be a chosen individual, just like that beautiful hunter. If she was strong enough to navigate the labyrinth level alone, then her power must be extraordinary. On the night when the others were already asleep, Michelle appeared to leave the inn with a gloomy expression. He said he came here because he heard that this level wasn't too crowded. Boxo was also curious why his expression was different from earlier in the day. Michelle suddenly shouted. He felt extremely nervous and didn't understand why people kept staring at him, which made him frightened. Boxo thought this might be his true personality. Suddenly, Michelle shouted again, saying he didn't like talking to other people. Seeing this, Boxo wanted to help him. He remembered that Coco could help relax the nerves. Boxo then made a welcome sound to get his attention. Boxo had transformed all his products into cocoa drinks. And indeed, Michelle felt calmer after drinking it. He was impressed by the useful magical item. Plus, he didn't feel nervous because he wasn't currently facing humans directly. Michelle decided to conduct negotiations the next day. Boxo was worried when he heard this, fearing that Michelle might want to buy himself from Lammus. The next day, Lammus informed them that Michelle wanted to accompany them on their missions. It turned out that this was what the negotiations were about. During the journey, Lammus asked Michelle why he wanted to join them when he originally wanted to enter the labyrinth. Michelle only replied with a forced yes. Hulami didn't mind, especially since they were being accompanied by a more experienced hunter. Michelle responded in the same manner. Maiken felt honored to work with a hunter known as the Lone Black Lightning. Once again, Michelle responded in the same manner. Afterward, Lammus asked how long it would take to navigate this massive labyrinth. Based on the map Boxo had obtained, Hulami estimated it would take approximately 3 weeks. When Hulami tried to ask Michelle the same question, he responded in the same manner as before. Hulami felt a bit puzzled, and suddenly, Michelle ran to the back, claiming it was for safety reasons. At night, Boxo and Michelle were still awake. Michelle still felt very nervous. He was traveling with two beautiful women and a cute group of bear cats. To appear normal, he could only respond as he had before. Before the others went to sleep, they said it was fine if Boxo stayed awake. However, Michelle was still unsure if the magical item had a mind of its own. Then suddenly, Boxo made a sound as if responding to Michelle's doubts. After that, Michelle bought cocoa drinks again, just like before. He felt extremely calm when doing so, even though shopping usually stressed him out. 1 week had passed, and the days had been normal with no fights at all. However, today Lammis seemed a bit off. Hulmi also noticed this and advised Lammis to rest in the carriage if she didn't feel well. Still, Lammis insisted she was fine. When Michelle also told her to rest, suddenly Lammis's body swayed as if she was about to fall. Fortunately, Boxo quickly transformed into a box, allowing Michelle to catch Lammis and prevent her from falling. Boxo then realized that this happened every month. Lammis always experienced this condition. Boxo suddenly remembered that a woman would go through menstruation. He transformed himself into a sanitary pad vending machine. Initially, Hulmi didn't understand why Boxo had changed. After Boxo produced the sanitary pads and was examined by Hulmi, she realized that this device would be useful for Lammis due to its exceptional absorbency. Not only that, Boxo transformed himself into an automatic clothes washer to clean Lammis' clothes. Now, 2 weeks had passed. According to Hulmi, they could return to this level's Hunter Association in 3 days. After the previous incident, Michelle became more confident and joined the others for meals. He also seemed to adapt well. Later, Maiken sensed something from a distance and asked them to stop. Pell also tried to sniff it out and mentioned that there was a scent of 4 or 5 humans coming from the front. They didn't know what they were talking about, but from their voices, it sounded like men. Suddenly, Michelle apologized and said that those people were probably there to incarnate him. He wanted to go alone to avoid involving Lammis and the others. However, Lammis immediately stopped him from acting alone. Lammis and Hulmi assured him that their safety was guaranteed as long as Boxo was with them. Boxo then demonstrated his protective abilities. They made a bet: if Michelle's attack didn't hit them, he would have to stay with them. But if it did, Michelle could go alone. Boxo had great confidence in his protective abilities. Michelle unsheathed his sword and launched a powerful dragon-projected attack. Boxo's protection held, but it cost him 500 points. The attack was incredibly powerful. Even an 8-legged alligator attack cost 1,000 points. This meant that Michelle had about half of that power. So, eventually, Michelle agreed to stay with the group. Lammis, Boxo, Maiken, and Michelle moved forward to observe these people. Maiken was now sure that there were 5 individuals. Michelle could also sense that 3 of them were skilled swordsmen, while the other 2 were likely magic users or possessors of blessings. Lammis was surprised that Michelle could sense this from such a distance. Shortly after, they finally encountered the group of 5 people. Without hesitation, they stated that they had come to kill Michelle. The leader of the group inquired about Lammis and Maiken, who were behind Michelle. Michelle explained that they were not his companions, so there was no need to harm them. Lammis and Maiken were touched by his words and determined to assist Michelle to the best of their abilities. Ultimately, a battle became inevitable. 2 of them went after Lammis and Maiken, but luckily, Boxo was there to protect them. Lammis attacked them using Boxo, who transformed into a water sprayer. Boxo also added a feature that made their eyes burn like soap for cars. This allowed them to capture the 2 individuals using ropes. Meanwhile, Michelle only had to defeat the leader of the group, and it didn't take him long to do so. Whatever he did, Michelle moved incredibly fast and defeated the person in an instant. After the battle was over, Michelle thanked Lammis, Boxo, and Maiken for their help. Then, Michelle asked Lammis to call the others over. He would stay here to interrogate these individuals. When the others arrived, Michelle apologized again for involving them. feeling guilty. Lemus mentioned that she was used to being involved in such matters because of Boxo. Boxo also felt guilty hearing this. Michel couldn't explain in detail why his life was targeted, but it was clear that it would be more dangerous for him to continue traveling with Lemus and the others. Therefore, Michel decided to go to another level. Before leaving, he suggested that Michel should consider joining the Fool's Brigade. Coincidentally, Carrioil had mentioned that he was looking for strong people, regardless of their background. Michel said he would try to contact them later. After that, he bid them farewell and left. Once he was far enough from the others, he felt nervous because the Fool's Brigade was filled with people he didn't know. He didn't feel capable of facing them.